to explore tonight is the core and hardness in the core. It's, I've just come off the beach and I went and saw my sister. We caught up at the beach and she was talking about, that sort of lower belly pooch that we get sometimes, or the sense of our stomach starting to push out. And we become so obsessed with sometimes trying to suck in, that we can end up over hardening the abdominal muscles. They're not actually meant to be stuck in concrete. And so if your belly is hard, it just creates this kind of ripple effect of issues across the breath, across, of course, the pelvic floor, which then starts to ripple out, shoulders, neck, elbows, wrists, knees, the whole lot. So we want to get this center to be able to be strong, but also to be supple, to be flexible, to be able to move. And so we'll start by doing that. We'll loosen it and then we'll get going. So you've got either the foam roller, a rolled up blanket or towel, or if you want to just roll up your mat, the way you roll it after a class, any one of those is fine. So I just want to show you before I lay down that we'll go to 3 spots. At first will be in upper ribs, then we'll go straight onto belly button, then we'll go into lower belly, just so that you know we're doing 3 spots. So I'm going to work with the blanket. So come down please, put the blanket just under the ribs or on the border of the upper ribs, and place the elbows on the mat in a cobra. And let this settle for a moment. Just notice what your breath thinks of that. And what we're applying a little bit of pressure to here is directly the diaphragm muscle. The diaphragm muscle is often the missing piece in our education about our core, about our pelvic floor. We've been taught for so long, squeeze the pelvic floor, squeeze the pelvic floor. But it doesn't work on its own. It works in symphony with the diaphragm. They're the top and the bottom of your deep core. If this is a pretty intense sensation, you can stay here. If you feel like you're able to, actually lay yourself down. Now, the diaphragm is this parachute-like muscle. It's a flat disc-like muscle that sits underneath the lungs. When you breathe in, it moves down. When you breathe out, it moves up. And it moves up and down like one of those beautiful rainbow-coloured parachutes that we use. Kind of moves up and down. Now, if the diaphragm's not functioning flexibly, if it's tight and stuck, what it does is it creates this sort of pressure in our abdominal cavity. It's called intra-abdominal pressure. And that's when it starts to lock up our core. Our core actually can't be strong because it's locked, it's stuck in place. The other cool thing about the diaphragm is that the diaphragm has some fibers from it, some muscle fibers, that travel along the front of your spine, behind all your digestive organs, right down to the pelvis and actually connects into the pelvic floor. So that when your diaphragm is flexible and you're breathing properly, your pelvic floor naturally is working. So see if you can take some really broad breaths out into the ribs, down into the blanket or bolster or foam roller, instead of into the belly. Try and keep the breath up high. We're going to stay here just for 5 more breaths. It's about a minute. Just reminding yourself here that the breath is the core. They work together. There's nothing separate. One affects the other. And so any obsession we have with sort of a six-pack and crunches and that being what our abs are is actually making your deep core, the supportive core, bound up. It can't support you because it's stuck. Stay here. Bring your hands back underneath your shoulders. Put a little bit of weight into the hands as you gently roll up into a cobra. And then as you relax down, breathe out and see if you can really feel the blanket move into where the diaphragm domes. 3 more like that. Inhale up. Relax down, blanket moves into where the diaphragm domes. 2 more. Now come up back onto the elbows. Move the blanket down a little bit so that this time it's now directly in your belly button. Rest again on the elbows. If you've just had something to eat or something heavy like a coffee or a smoothie to drink, this can be a little bit gross, so stay here. If you're okay, either now or when this starts to soften off, you can lay yourself down again. So now we start to get into a reminder and a big deal with the core, which is our gut health. And this is the thing, I was asking a friend, she's a physio, I was asking her about when our bellies get really distended. You know, I see it in my sons sometimes. Their bellies really bloat up. And I asked her about that. I said, what is that? You know, and how do we address it? And what it is it's inflammation from the foods we eat. And if we chronically have a lot of inflammation in our gut, then the core starts to learn to work by pushing outwardly. And so what you're trying to remind your core of here with the blanket is that its strength is when it turns into the center. And again, when it can do that flexibly, that there's a flexibility to it. Please give yourself 5 more breaths here. Please gently place the hands again underneath the armpits, the shoulders. Roll up, inhale. And as you exhale, the diaphragm empties. You empty the breath out and you allow the bolster to really drop into the belly. 3 more. Inhale up. Roll down, really let the bolster drop into the belly. There's a sense of hollowing, of it going deeper in. Please return to your elbows. One last spot. Move the blanket now below the belly button, down into the lower belly, pretty much where you would have a low belt buckle or your seat belt lash. Again, we begin on the elbows. If this is uncomfortable, you can stay, or if you're fine, rest on down. So this one starts to bring us down now into the pelvis. And the deeper role that pelvic stability plays in our core. Where the blanket is now, there's a muscle called the transversus abdominis. And it's like an elastic band that wraps the whole pelvis there. And when it contracts and creates pelvic stability, lower back stability, deep core stability. It's another layer of the deep core with the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. And we also get a little bit here, just depending on how chronic it is for you, is a release of the hip flexors. If yours aren't particularly tight or give you any particular grief, you might not feel that. But if they do, it might be giving you a bit of sensation right now. That's okay, stay with it. Now see if you can feel here, every time you breathe out, the blanket or bolster progressively hollowing deeper into the pelvis. You have 5 more breaths here. Again, please place the hands underneath the shoulders. Roll up on your inhale. Relax down on the exhale. 3 more. Please gently press back to child's pose. You're not going to need that equipment again, so place it to the side. In this child's pose, we're going to bring the knees together so that your belly continues with a little bit of compression, either onto the thighs with fists stacked underneath the eyebrows, or if you have the range, take the hands back to the ankles and relax them. And see if you can feel here as you breathe out the sense of the upper, then the middle, then the lower belly hollowing. Just like you still had the towel or the blanket or the foam roller there, and you progressively were rolling it across the 3 points. As you breathe out, hollow upper, middle, then lower. Please stretch the hands out in front of you. Take the knees out into a nice wide child's pose. And this time let the belly soften down, eyebrows relax. And begin to stretch your back out in this child's pose. See if you can creep the hands forward a little further while you also sit the hips back and down. Two more breaths here. Please rise to hands and knees. Cat-cow. Look up, inhale. As you exhale, curl under from upper, middle, then lower belly. Keep doing that, inhale. And let it be quite systematic. Ribs draw in, navel draws in, front hip bones draw in. 3 more. So that we start to see the core as a series of parts. We don't sort of relate to it just as belly button back or flexing, but we start to feel, okay, it's, you know, we empty the diaphragm at the ribs, we empty the navel, we engage between the hip bones. Last 2. There's quite a few options for this pose depending on what's happening with knees, ankles, hips. So the first option is to take just a basic Z-sit. Bring the left heel back, the right knee forward, and you're going to lay back like that. So you lay back on your equipment. If that's not feeling great on either knee, you may need to completely undo that and instead do a little bit of a different shape, which is crossing the knees and reaching down for the ankles. The other option, if you do have the range, is to bend both legs back. So both legs are back, You're sitting between them and lying back onto the bolster. You may need a few extra layers. You may need to double bolster or put some extra cushions there. Okay, just be prepared for those of us with double legs. We're going to be here for 7 minutes. Those of us with single legs, I'll let you know when to change sides. Okay, so we're looking, if you're on your back and you're leaning back over a bolster, we're looking to release our diaphragm here. If you've got the cross-legged, don't worry, but you can visualize this. You're going to use your fingertips and just begin to walk the bottom edge of your rib bones. Walk them up to the sternum and then walk down the bottom edge all the way out to the waist. And then walk up that again. And then walk down to the waist. Okay, we're going to try a little bit of self-release of our diaphragm. So using your fingertips, you're actually going to curl them. Curl them in underneath the ribs. So actually feel that they're sort of pushing up into the body a little bit. And start to do that along the edge of the ribs. Now go slowly. I often see people quite rushing this. Go slowly. Feel the exhale every time. You can actually feel the diaphragm moving. What we're palpating now is actually the diaphragm as it attaches. This is where it attaches along the ribs, the inner ribs. And if as you kind of work along, pushing into and feeling into the ribs there, if you find a spot that's quite sharp and uncomfortable, you're going to attempt to stay and hold a little bit of pressure with the fingertips. So that your fingertips are working like a foam roller or like you've gone to get a myofascial massage, a deep tissue massage. You might like to close the eyes. See if you can apply a bit more pressure when you breathe out. And we're looking to again release these diaphragms. People often come to me, they want to work on their core, they want to work on their pelvic floor, they want to work on their abs. None of that matters if you can't breathe deeply. And none of that will work if you can't breathe deeply. If the diaphragm is locked up, it is the roof of the core, the lid of the core. If it's locked up, then your core function is locked up. So you might feel that that point's still quite sharp, it's taking a while to settle. You can stay there or you can come back to it. Remember, we're here for 7 minutes. You're welcome to close the eyes. For those of you that have the single leg, you've still got a minute left here. Keep breathing. those of you with single legs, you're just going to gently press into the things that support you. If you've got two legs, stay there. And if you have the single leg, you're just going to change sides, change the leg that's in front. Or if you're on your back with the legs cross-legged, just switch them over. And for these next 3.5 minutes, if you feel that the diaphragm's really bound up and you're getting a lot of benefit from releasing, you can continue to do that. But you are also welcome now just to let the hands relax, close the eyes. And start to build the relationship that your core strength isn't about 1,000 sit-ups. That a supple diaphragm, the ability to take really long breaths out, and reducing inflammation in our gut, which may mean that you need to be a little honest with yourself about your nutrition, how you're nourishing yourself. That these things have a huge effect on the core. And it starts to change the essence of how we support ourselves. That deep support starts to be about, can I really take long breaths out? Is my diaphragm healthy? Am I nourishing myself? Is my pelvis stable? Thirty more seconds here. It's about 3 breaths. If it's not 3 breaths, that indicates your diaphragm's tight. Your lung capacity is a little restricted. And make that your priority for your core. Please gently press into the things that support you. Take your time, especially if you've been in the double-legged version. We've been in a back bend for 7 minutes. That's actually huge. Very, very, very slowly come back up. Don't lean forward. We want to let our spine find the center first. Tuck the knees in, just sit for a moment. You can find a steady eye gaze or close the eyes. And just gently turn and twist one way. And turn and twist the other way. Okay, one last little abdominal exercise before we finish our class. So the exercise is Kapalabhati, which is a breath exercise. Some of you may know it. It involves us bouncing the belly button back. And it really gives you a sense of the flexibility of the diaphragm. What you're aiming to do is as you exhale, you bounce the belly button back. The breath empties and is vacuumed up and is pushed out in a little. Now we don't breathe in. If your diaphragm is flexible, you'll be able to relax, diaphragm will fill, the lungs will fill. Then you squeeze it out. Then as you inhale, the diaphragm will pull down, breath will be drawn in. And you exhale, draw back. Now you don't actually breathe in, it happens naturally with the move. We'll do 3 rounds. You may wish to just watch me for the first round if you haven't done it. 3 rounds of 30 repetitions. Take an inhale, please. Kapalabhati. Breathe out, please. 2 more rounds. You may wish to join in now. Inhale. Last round, 30 repetitions. Please be still, notice how you feel. Check that there's a slight drop down of the chin, so that there's a very slight blocking of the throat. And we maintain that heat in the navel, it's not rising up to the brain, where it can make us hot-headed. You are now welcome to make your way onto your back, to lie on your back for Shavasana. You are also welcome today to finish class in a seated meditation if you prefer. Please make yourself comfortable. The message that comes about from considering the natural function of our core is quite clear. Bracing, armoring, hardening up don't support us. They actually place more shearing forces across the body, and they create inflammation. And so we end up feeling inflamed, wound up, and under load. The well function of our core is a core that is flexible, mobile. A core that's able to stabilize us, that allows us to take some really big, hollowing breaths out. And that supports us without inflammation. That we're flexible, steady, and supported. Please bring the hands into Anjali Mudra. If you're lying, make your way to seated. And Om to finish our practice. Inhale. Namaste.